The soft hum of the engines filled the cabin as passengers settled into their seats, stowing bags overhead and buckling belts. Somewhere in the middle of economy class, a black woman leaned against the window, her eyelids heavy with exhaustion. She was in her early 30s, dressed plainly in jeans and a hoodie, her hair wrapped in a scarf. To the casual eye, she looked like any tired traveler catching a nap before a long flight. Her name was Danielle Rivers. She had boarded quietly, avoiding small talk. Life had worn her down lately. Losing her father, who had been her greatest inspiration, had left a hole in her chest. He had taught her discipline, strength, and resilience. But grief made everything feel hollow. She was heading home from visiting her mother, trying to reassure her family that she was holding it together. Though deep down, she wasn't. As the plane climbed above the clouds, Danielle drifted into a deep sleep, the kind that only comes when someone is both exhausted and quietly trying to escape their thoughts. Hours passed. Drinks were served, laughter echoed from small clusters of travelers, and babies cried softly in the distance. Then, suddenly, something shifted. The intercom crackled. The captain's voice trembled slightly, unusual for someone trained to sound calm at all times. Ladies and gentlemen, if there is any passenger on board with fighter pilot or military aviation experience, please ring your call button immediately. This is urgent. The cabin went silent. Cups paused halfway to lips, eyes widened. Fear spread like wildfire. A flight attendant rushed down the aisle, scanning faces, whispering into her radio. Danielle stirred awake, groggy at first, then puzzled by the fearful silence. She caught fragments of worried whispers. What's happening? Why would they need a fighter pilot? Something must be wrong with the plane. The request repeated, this time sharper, more desperate. Any former fighter pilot on board, please identify yourself right now. Danielle's heart skipped. Her breath caught in her throat. She wasn't just some ordinary passenger. Years ago, before she lost her father, before the weight of grief slowed her fire, Danielle had been one of the few black women fighter pilots in the U.S. Air Force. She had flown combat missions, made split-second decisions in life, or death skies, and carried a reputation for being unshakable under pressure. But after leaving the service, she had buried that part of her identity, tucking it away under layers of loss and doubt. Now, here she was, staring at the call button above her. For a moment, she hesitated. Her pulse thundered in her ears. Could she really step into that role again? Could she carry the weight of so many lives on her shoulders? The flight attendant's voice trembled as she rushed past again. One need help. Please. Anyone. Danielle swallowed hard, then pressed the button. The attendant stopped in her tracks. Ma'am, are you? Danielle nodded slowly. I'm a former fighter pilot. United States Air Force. The relief on the attendant's face was almost overwhelming as she grabbed Danielle's hand. Come with me. Quickly. Passengers stared, whispering in disbelief, as Danielle was escorted toward the cockpit. Some gave skeptical looks, as though doubting someone who looked like her could have ever worn the wings of a fighter pilot. She ignored the whispers, her father's voice echoing in her memory. Never let them define you, Danny. You know who you are. Step into it. Inside the cockpit, the captain's face was pale with sweat. His co-pilot was slumped over unconscious, medical staff already trying to revive him. The captain turned to her. One of our systems is failing. We may lose control if it worsens. If I pass out too, we need someone who knows how to handle a plane at this altitude. You're all we've got. Danielle inhaled sharply, her hands trembling for just a second before muscle memory took over. She scanned the instruments, her training roaring back like a tide. Years may have passed, but the instincts were still there, buried but never gone. "I can do this," she said firmly. Minutes stretched into hours as Danielle worked side by side with the captain, steadying the aircraft through turbulence, rerouting systems, and calming the shaken crew. At one point, the captain nearly blacked out from strain, and Danielle took the controls fully, her voice calm and steady over the intercom as she reassured terrified passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Danielle Rivers. I'm a former Air Force fighter pilot. You are safe. I will not let anything happen to you." The cabin erupted in whispers again. Some wept with relief. Others bowed their heads in silent prayers of gratitude. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, the ground crew guided them toward an emergency landing strip. Danielle's hands were steady as she eased the plane down, wheels touching the runway with the grace of someone who had faced far worse in combat skies. The cabin exploded into applause and sobs as the plane slowed to safety. When the doors opened, reporters and emergency crews swarmed the scene. But Danielle stepped aside quietly, not craving the spotlight. She only wanted to breathe, to feel the weight lift from her shoulders. As she walked back down the aisle, passengers reached out, some clasping her hands, others whispering tearful thanks. A little girl looked up at her with wide eyes and said, "I want to be like you one day." Danielle's throat tightened. She smiled softly, blinking back tears. In that moment, she realized her father had never truly left her. His lessons, his courage, and his belief in her lived on in every decision she made. That flight didn't just save lives. It reignited Danielle's purpose. Sometimes, the world waits for the moment when you're needed most to remind you of who you really are. And as Danielle stepped off that plane, the sun breaking through stormy skies, she knew she was no longer just surviving her grief. She was soaring again. Inspiring closure for YouTube life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. Danielle's story reminds us that no matter how much pain we carry, the strength within us can rise again. Sometimes not just for ourselves, but for others who depend on us. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of courage, kindness, and hope.